Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in these trying times. I hope everyone at home is doing really well and is ready to learn today in this hour session that we have here. We have a fantastic panel here of agents, managers, and attorneys, and I think that we will have a great discussion about the state of the industry and also a lot of the subjects that you guys want to know about when it comes to dealing with your representation. Furthermore, I wanted to thank Jan, who is our interpreter here, and she's doing a fantastic job, and you can see that on your screen. This is a fun panel to do. I think last year we did this panel, and it was during a very sort of upheaval time as there were negotiations going on. And luckily, a year later, everything's back to normal. But we are glad to be here. And I want to start by going around and having our panel introduce themselves so that everyone here at home can understand who we've got here. So I would like to point in a particular direction, but why don't we start with you, Matt?
Sure, happy to. So my name is Matt D. I am a literary manager at Adam Kohlbrenner's Lit Entertainment Group. We launched at the top of 2019. That's when I joined the team as well. Prior to that, I came from the Austin Film Festival, where I was the director of script competitions there for about 9 years. And so I bring a different perspective to management. I lived in Texas for a long time and worked with a lot of writers, but obviously on the competition side. And you started development programs there, worked with writers sort of in a managerial way where my job was to put hands in hands for the top writers in the competition. That's how I got in touch with Adam Kohlbrenner and made the shift over to management at the top of 2019 once Lit started. But yeah, that's just kind of my journey. Lit Entertainment is obviously a management company, but we also have a producerial arm as well. We represent writers for film and television. We really love original voices, up and coming writers, and really pride ourselves really in coming up with original stories. We were very excited for Free Guy to come out, but that has been delayed indefinitely. But that was a project that was developed internally, and we're very proud of a lot of our original slate. But yeah, I guess that's it. Probably we'll talk about more throughout the panel.
Cool. Alan?
Hi, my name's Alan Wertheimer. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing since 1972. My practice, I think, mainly focuses on writers and directors. I do represent some actors and actresses, but I'd say my career has sort of mostly been focused on writers, and then as writers became directors, that part of my business has happened as well. So one of the things I think I specialize in is credit arbitrations, which we can talk about if anyone's interested in that process. And I guess that's about it.
Great. Priya?
Let me unmute so you don't hear my dogs. My name is Priya Satiani. I am at Management 360. I've been a manager for a little over a decade. I started my career at ICM. And I think, for me, I started working with writers and directors, kind of then went into representing more in the talent space. And by way of that, I'm now representing a lot of multi-hyphenates and a lot of actors who really want to kind of have their own agency in creating material for themselves. So from Chinonye Chukwu, who was the first Black woman to win the Sundance Film Festival 2 years ago, to Saucy Beats and Jonathan Majors, it's wildly important for me as a first-generation immigrant myself to really help maximize the voices of those marginalized groups. And while it has been, all over the front page of the Deadlines and the Hollywood Reporters and the Varieties over the course of the last couple of years, it's really been a mission statement of mine for over a decade. And it's been really fun to see that shift and to see how actors have also really found their own, from Greta Gerwig to Daniel Kaluuya, as far as creating content that lives forever and is a part of their legacy themselves. So that's me.
And Chris.
Yeah, my name is Chris Noriega. I am a TV lit agent at Verve. I'm from the Bay Area and started my career working in finance in San Francisco, and had always just been a huge movie, TV person. I just loved movies and television shows growing up, and didn't really know much about what that looked like in terms of a career. But I decided that I wanted to hit reset on my career. And so I quit my job in San Francisco, moved down to LA, started in the mailroom. I was in my 30s. I was kind of, the older guy in the mailroom, and found my way to Verve. I started at Verve as an assistant year one in Verve's history. So it was very much at the time this garage startup company. And I've been there ever since. So I've been an agent there for 8 years. And it's been a really fun run to see the place grow from pretty humble beginnings to where we're at now, and where we're going in the future.
Fantastic. Well, it's so great to have you all here. And I think we're going to have a really exciting discussion. So I just want to start for a brief bit at the beginning of this year to maybe talk about some of the changes that are going on in the industry, oftentimes forced. So first, I kind of wanted to ask about how has the coronavirus kind of epidemic affected your day-to-day operations, or kind of how you represent clients and conduct business? Are you seeing less projects? Are you seeing less of certain kinds of projects? So if anyone wants to jump in and answer that.
Happy to. It is, at least for me, been a whole lot of triage for the last 8 months. I think there has been perspective shift throughout the different waves of information that we've received as an industry. And for myself, it's the first time in a long time that I haven't been able to have all of the answers to all of the questions. We have seen a complete shift as far as stop dates go, which, that in itself is affecting the amount of workload writers, directors, and actors can take on a yearly basis. Location shifts have really kind of, made it more difficult to see things greenlit in a real way. Obviously, we're all dealing with the problem when it comes to insurance, when it comes to getting a movie off the ground. So with that, I've seen a lot of success under the banners of companies like Netflix that have the ability to create content during a really trying and undeterminable time. That said, I do really believe that it's just kind of shape-shifting the independent space also in a very beautiful way. David Fincher was talking about his deal with Netflix this morning, and as someone who I think we can all point to has created some incredible art over the last decades, there is a change in how we're accessing content. And I think we finally reckoned with that as an industry by way of the pandemic, as far as movie theaters, as far as independent film, and not saturating the market, and instead really making sure that when financiers are taking risk on film, that they are all the way in. And that's been really refreshing and exciting to be a part of. So that's been my direct experience. And I would assume that it's going to continue to change until we have some real semblance of a vaccine and people feeling safe insuring movie sets and television sets.
Yeah, so at Verve, our core business is really writers. And so we do represent a lot of directors, and it's been hard for the director business. Obviously, a lot of productions have been shut down, or they've started up and then have been shut down, and there's just so much uncertainty there. But on the writer side of things, the good news is writers can write, and people were able to sell projects. Writers' rooms were still moving forward and just moving forward virtually. So when the pandemic hit, it wasn't like an all of a sudden just shut down, everything is stopped. At least for writers, there was still a lot of activity and a lot of business. And I think, there was this major concern going through this year of, well, there's eventually going to be this backlog where if no new things are getting made, development pipelines are going to get log jams, and that's eventually going to affect buying practices. And things are starting to open up. Productions are starting to move forward. So we're noticing at the end of this year, again, a little bit of a surge. So it was, this has been an insane, scary, name all the words you want to name experience. But everyone's doing their best to power through it.
I agree that development seems to have continued unabated. I'm doing, lots and lots of writer deals, even making director development deals. Certainly there's very little in production right now. What there is seems to be happening overseas, either Australia. I've got one going in Ireland, but very little. And obviously, no one's going to the movies, which is a real challenge. You've got all the studios sort of saving their blockbusters for next year. So there's going to be a glut of product on the market when the theaters do open. And I don't know, it's an unpredictable moment in our business.
Yeah, and just like what Alan said about development, like that's something that over at Lit, we really pride ourselves in, is hardcore development with all of our clients. So even more so, we focused on that with our clients on the day-to-day basis. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, I think more and more people were forced to focus on the development slate. Now that we're reaching towards the end of the year, I feel like a lot of companies are just now overloaded on development. And so that's just kind of how we've seen things throughout the year. But for us, in very unusual times, I think we've done our best to maintain business as usual, just because development has always been our bread and butter, working with writers. I mean, we rep writers first and foremost, writer directors as well. And so we did everything that we could to give opportunities for our writers virtually. Even on the signing side, a lot of writers who felt like they had to be in LA to take in-person meetings, we're all on Zoom, so this has opened up opportunities for people in other countries. Like for us, meeting with writers internationally, I mean, we would still do that over the phone during normal times, but even more so now, we've really opened it up more so in terms of just finding those new voices from all over the place. It doesn't matter where they're at. Obviously for TV, you need to be in LA, but since there's not very much production going on, we're really just doing what we can, like to work and find new voices wherever they're at and find opportunities however we can. But yeah, I think I just kind of echo what everyone else just said too.
Fantastic. I think this is great for everyone who's listening to know that things are moving. You guys this is still a great opportunity. I think it's good to understand, where the folks are going to be contacting, how things are going with them. So along those similar lines, I kind of wanted to talk about the other disruption that's kind of occurring, which is how are the disagreements between the ATA affected your business, and maybe what should a writer change about how they approach this coming process, given that there's still this kind of confusion in the industry. And you're welcome to speak to this if you can. If you can't, I totally understand. I just want to get some thoughts from you guys.
Well, we're really down now to 2 agencies that are still supposed to, that are prevented from representing writers because they are not signatories to a franchise agreement. With allegations of death threats coming from Rick Rosen at WME, things seem to have taken a pretty ugly turn. I find that a lot of writers who shall go unnamed are sort of conducting business as usual with their CAA and WME agents, just sort of ignoring the boycott. Not all, and I think on the other side of the coin, WME and CAA have lost a lot of clients over this that have sort of patiently been waiting to go back, and I think when ICM and UTA signed up, they just left. So and management companies have been, have been filling in, probably in ways that are contrary to the Talent Agent Act. But it's just one of the many disruptions that's happening in the business right now. It's hard to summarize, but it isn't good. It really isn't good.
Yeah, as a manager, I definitely, I think we felt the pressure before the pandemic, and we're feeling it even more so now as far as workload, trying to keep up, trying to continue our role as managers while still supporting our clients who are taking it incredibly seriously and not conducting business with specific agencies who haven't signed the code of conduct. But I also think it's been a real moment for us to kind of look at the balance of power within our industry, right? And I think that it really was a wake-up call to a lot of people as far as how much was being given to the agencies as well, right? And I don't think there was any easy way to kind of reset the table. And I do truly believe that we were on a path of some type of resolution, and this pandemic, which will come to a close. I am optimistic that there will be an end to this and there will be a normalization of finances, but it is scary out there for people who have had very inflated salaries for a very long time, who are no longer, cultivating that same business without signing this code of conduct. So I don't know how it will play out, but I can certainly say that I personally miss having, the partnership in the two agencies. And I've seen a lot of clients pick other agencies because of it. So we'll see how much longer that can go before someone has to make the move on the chessboard.
Yeah, something we've noticed is, pre this whole situation, everyone kind of had an agent. So if you were competing for a signing pursuit, your case would be why us versus them. And that's changed. Now, not everybody needs an agent, and people are sort of tailoring what their team looks like. Whereas before it was sort of like a given, like you had an agent, maybe you had a manager, maybe you had a lawyer, maybe you had all three. And now we get the question of, well, why do I need an agency? What do you guys do if I'm getting X, Y, and Z from my manager and I'm getting all these things from my attorney? And totally fair question. And the answer is not everybody needs an agent. I think that is, even as this gets resolved, whenever it does, I think that's here to stay. I think people are going to have tailored teams for whatever fits their need. And it's not always going to include an agent, which is going to be fine.
I think that just speaks to the duplication of activities and responsibilities that managers and agents have. I think that line is sort of more blurry now than it's ever been.
My only rebuttal to that is the workload that has come from this situation for managers is not sustainable. It's not. Right? Because I think that we are not lawyers. I understand the dynamic of having managers with lawyers. We are not publicists. We cannot take on the role as a publicist as hard as we try to save that money on behalf of clients. There is an ecosystem that exists and a job that was created for managers based on that ecosystem that has all of a sudden had a massive plug pulled on it. So if there is going to be a restructuring for managers to take on those roles, what I foresee and what I'm seeing is that managers are going to start representing far less people. And I think that also makes it hard as far as breaking people in this industry, right? Where it is my duty to make sure that I have enough time on my plate to be able to represent as many people as I do. I cannot do that single-handedly. I need partnership in order to do that successfully, or I need to restructure my business completely in order to do that the right way.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to what everyone else just said so eloquently, because when I became a new manager at the top of 2019, and literally my first week on the job was going to that meeting at the W in Hollywood with the WGA, with the other managers. And like, what did I just walk into? Making this new career move. And so I came into this not working with agents at all. And so the changing landscape was my new normal already walking into it as a new manager. So this is the first year that I've started working with agents, and it's been very interesting. We're in terms of how they're servicing my clients, our clients, and you know, some are great and some are, I think, are just overloaded. Like they were not ready to come back to working with writers. And so like it's been normal for me in terms of my job. So, but yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add.
Fantastic. Well, that was, I think, a really great discussion. I think everyone who, whatever part of the process, whether you're looking for representation or whether you have representation, I think it's good to know kind of the current state of the industry. And I think you guys just provided a really good introspective look at what's going on right now. I want to move on to kind of some of the more fun stuff, so to speak, of finding talent. For you guys, right now, there's kind of a lot of digital options and contests. You know, Matt, you came from that world, from the contest world. So I wanted to talk about how have the avenues in which you look for talent changed, and where are you guys looking for talent now with writing competitions and the Blacklist and other digital avenues? Where are you guys looking, and how's that process been going recently?
Sure. I mean, I'll just jump in since I was the competition guy. I still am the resident competition guy here at Lit. But yeah, I mean, like I've personally have seen the value of competitions as a platform for emerging voices. And you know, we love judging for competitions. We're always scouring and reading anything and everything. So I don't think it's necessarily changed that much in terms of the competition scene. But in terms of like working with new writers, I think because of the call for underrepresented voices to be heard this year, there have been a lot of really great positive change in that respect. A lot of people have gone together to create these online initiatives through Twitter and other platforms. You know, Vera Herbert, who's a writer on This Is Us, had that Blackout Tuesday thing that she did on Twitter, and we still regularly get writers, underrepresented voices directly from her. And we've ended up signing a few writers from that, and some really great writers. And so that wouldn't have happened if these initiatives didn't come up. So in terms of like the positive side, the fun things is just that, you know, it gives more opportunity for voices to be heard, just generally. But yeah, in terms of competitions, fellowship programs, all of that, all of those have obviously gone virtually as well. And it's still same order of business for us in terms of finding talent.
Things haven't changed too much in that regard to how we're finding new writers, new creators. We rely a lot on our manager friends and partners. We also rely a lot on our current clients. Especially on the TV side, where people are in rooms. Now, granted, it's like virtual rooms now, but you know, a recommendation from a current client goes a really long way, and that is, I would say, where we've gotten a lot of our newer clients come in from existing clients.
Yeah, I agree with the both of you. Actually, I think that if anything, it has allowed for more time to discover this moment, right? I think this is the first time I haven't traveled for work in 8 months, and I'm sure everybody on this panel can attest to that. So I think it's really allowed me to dig deeper and actually participate in more of the panels and read more than I've ever been able to read before. And it's really exciting. I think people are motivated to find new voices, as I think, Matt, you said earlier on the panel. And I think that for me personally, I really point to, on the television side, the way that I do my job best is looking towards television that I'm watching, right? To me, Atlanta is a show that I can point to, that I feel is such a part of the zeitgeist, and understanding who is cultivated in that room and who's going to be staffed in the next season of that. I'm going to focus my energy in trying to understand who those writers are. So I would just say, you know, everyone has to take jobs for different reasons, but try to make a concerted effort to really pick what you think, and I know it's a luxury at times, but what really represents you well. And I think that will attract a very specific type of representation too.
I mean, I don't know that anybody's interested in how lawyers get clients, but you know, my business is probably half referral from agents and managers and business managers, and the other half is just sort of you know, my own interest in and passion for movies. I go to a lot of film festivals. If I see something by a young artist that I typically would be a writer director, but if I see something that inspires me, I would see what I can do about being the lawyer for that person. Matt, did you was Krisha when you were programming? Or that's South by Southwest. Were you?
Austin? Oh no, Austin Film Festival. Yeah.
God, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, you know, just an
I'm aware. Yeah.
Just an example of someone who, you know, I saw this little $50,000 movie and said, "Wow, this guy's talented," and now he's, I think, about to start his fourth feature.
Yeah.
So.
Well, okay. So moving on to kind of what sticks out amongst talent. I think all of you guys are looking for unique voices. I think that's a topic that's come up, you know, several times around. What kind of voices are you looking for? What recommendations do you have to writers to help cultivate a voice that might get your attention?
I just like authentic people, right? I think that it's unfair to say lean into the unique, because unique is different for everybody. It's all the perspective, right? And I've read writers in the past that are truly the best half-hour kings and queens that, you know, you can, am I someone that's watching New Girl every day? No, but do I respect that business? Absolutely. And do I think that, you know, to me, meeting someone with conviction around what it is that they want to do is the most exciting thing, right? And that there are going to be ebbs and flows of what the conviction looks like and what people are excited to do as you grow in your career. But yeah, I just like someone who has found themselves, right, in any capacity of the word, that knows what they want to put into the world and why they want to put it into the world. That gets me really excited.
How do you cultivate a voice? I think you either have a unique and authentic and original voice, or you don't. I'm not sure how voices get cultivated.
Well, yeah, I'll just say that, like, you know, echoing what Priya said, and I'll add to that as well, is that, you know, I always say this in terms of like voice, you know, for all of us as human beings, we tell the same stories over and over again. And so that's just by nature. And so what is your spin on a familiar story? Do you know who you are as a human being and what your role is in our life, in the world, in the universe, and what your POV is? Do you know what your superpower is? Do you have an interesting job that lends itself to being a storyteller? Did you live a life? As a storyteller, you're telling stories about other people's lives. Have you lived life? Are you writing for the marketplace, or are you writing for yourself with the marketplace in mind? Like, that's what we really look for, that marriage of art and commerce. We can smell it if we know that if you're writing for other people. If you're chasing the market, you're already too late. We already know all of that. And so, you know, do you know who you are, and do you know what you bring to the table? And also the other part of it too is, do you know when it's time to find a rep? Like, just because you've written one feature screenplay, that doesn't mean that you're ready. Have you gotten enough feedback? Have you written, do you have a variety of samples? Have you entered contests and have done well? Have you gone out within the industry and made connections on your own? Do you hustle? Can you generate? Do you have a lot of ideas? Do you have a handle on the types of stories that you know how to write? You know, I've met with writers who say, I can write it all. No one can write it all. Like, do you know specifically what you are best at writing at? You know, I don't know if there's like a direct answer for that specifically, but it's like somebody who feels very much very confident and assured of their voice and what they bring. And you just know that.
I would add to that, not to appear cynical, but I would add to that, what relationships do you have in the business that can help you? You know, I think networking is important. Cousins, uncles, all that stuff is important.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I mean, it's gotta be on the page. There has to be the voice there. That's a given. But the person's individual background and the story that they have to tell, that's also an important factor. And then, yeah, the hustle, the entrepreneurial spirit, like that also plays a role. So you kind of have to be hitting on all those three categories to get someone really excited.
Yeah, the entrepreneurial thing is very real, right? Because when I entered this industry, I didn't have anybody that I knew, right? But I went to college that, even though we hadn't at the time weren't excelling in writers and directors, I reached out to a lot of people, and I'm sure a lot of those people thought I was a major weirdo, right? And some of those people actually helped me cultivate some of my first clients in this industry. So I think having that approach and knowing that you have to kind of first start the building and be entrepreneurial in that way, because even with reps, it is a very symbiotic relationship. Like, we are all doing the hustle. We are all making the cold calls on behalf of each other. So we want, at least for me, I want to know that my partner in process is equally excited and driven as I am to do the work.
Fantastic. I think that was a really good kind of answer set from you guys. It covered a lot of different subjects. As far as the engagement with clients or prospective clients, I think from both sides, what are some tips you guys have for clients being professional in their contacts with you guys? What is it that you guys are looking for in terms of not the creative side, but in terms of professional and personality? Because Priya, you had mentioned that you were really interested in the personality of a person and a writer too. I think Chris, you mentioned something similar too. Do you guys want to maybe elaborate on that?
Sure. I feel like I'm talking a lot. So Chris, why don't you start?
And sorry, do you mean more for prospective clients or people that you're already currently working with, or both?
I would hope that you're not a dick to get a client, and then you're hopefully not going to stay one to keep your manager around. So yeah, in terms of interacting with clients, what kind of professionalism do you expect?
Yeah, it's I mean, it's kind of a tricky thing to answer, because it's a professional relationship, of course, client representative. But it also becomes it's a these are personal relationships too. When you're reading, as a rep, and you're reading the first draft of a script, I mean, you have to recognize that your clients, that's a very vulnerable thing to put something down on paper and say, read this and judge it and give me your opinion. So it's not as simple to say this is just like a straight business relationship. Like, you really get close to your clients and know and understand who they are as people. And your job is to also strategize what it is that they want to do big picture with their career. And so it's hard. There's no real sort of rules of engagement of, don't call me past this hour, don't send me this many emails. Like, it just doesn't, it's impossible to put any sort of rules around that. And the clients that you're in business with for a while, like you're talking to all the time, and you're very involved in their lives. So yeah, it's hard. I think it's a little bit different when you're talking about like prospective clients and people that you're not in business with yet. But for the people that you're working with, it's a pretty close relationship.
And I think it differs from rep to rep, right? Which is why when you find the right person on both sides, you really feel it. So for me, my relationship with each of my clients is incredibly different. There are certain clients of mine that I talk to 17 times a day about nothing. And then there are certain clients of mine that I can't even get on the phone to congratulate them on a job, right? So I think it really is, it's dependent on what it is that you need while also being realistic of boundaries. And I think that this moment with the pandemic, at least for myself, I've really been able to get clear about my boundaries. As a manager, I think it's also a little different than a lawyer and an agent. And I want to be helpful and talk through feelings and how people are affected by the state of the world and the state of the industry. But I also think it's wildly important for all of us to have therapists, right? So I think that there has to be kind of there has to be, when you meet with this prospective or respective client, you want to look at it, you want to take their calls. If there's an emergency on the weekend, you know that you're going to pick up that call and be helpful, right? So I think that both parties have to be really true to that and not just gravitate towards someone's client list. If you're signing with a manager, like, find out who that person is, and if you would feel comfortable talking to them in a moment of sincere vulnerability, which is so much of what this industry is.
Yeah. It also just depends from client to client. Like for me, I love finding new emerging voices. And so a lot of my clients are fairly green and developmental who need a lot of handholding. And so that means they need a lot of constant and regular communication. And I also have other clients who are a little bit more seasoned, mid and upper level, who don't need that as much. And so it is a conversation that we have with our clients, and in terms of the expectations of like what's needed, you know, like, and I have, you know, even when I first started signing writers in 2019, some of those baby writers who I had, you know, we figured out a process where I don't have to do as much hand holding, because we now kind of are able to sort of like telekinetically figure out what we need from each other. You know what I mean? So as time goes on, if the relationship continues to improve, then, you know, requires less hand holding. But at least, you know, here at Lit, for us, it's no matter if you're lower or an upper level client, you know, the process is still the same. What are you doing on a weekly basis, and what are we doing for you on a weekly basis as well? So, you know, we don't, like what Chris said, we also don't set arbitrary rules, but we do kind of have rules. These expectations of, you know, leading into the weekend, have you given us something to read, something for us to absorb, because that's our time to do it, you know? And so whether it's a log line for a new idea, an article, or a new draft, whatever, like we expect something. So it is that kind of progress. And it starts from a conversation that we have after we sign a client.
Fantastic. Well, okay, so there's this kind of fiction out there that a lot of writers, they spend so much time setting that goal of like trying to find one of you guys, but then when they get there, they just assume that things are just going to start happening. And I think I want to set some realistic questions about what are the realistic expectations for a writer in the first year after you begin working with them. And this is probably something really relevant to the managers here as well. And are there any patterns of what that first year looks like? And I just want to set people up with what how that relationship starts.
It's hard because you can't really kind of predict the future, particularly in such a unique time. I've had clients who unexpectedly, you know, within 6 weeks of working together, have been hired for massive jobs. And I've had other clients who have been a slower burn, but have been able to kind of develop their voices and what it is that they want to put into the world over a longer period of time. To be honest, and I'm really not trying to skirt the question, but I think that I think the best advice would be almost grappling with the idea of the unknown, right? And not setting these benchmarks for yourself in order to qualify or quantify your success, because it truly is different for everybody. And that is a very unpredictable, this whole industry is wildly unpredictable in that way, right? So I think instinctively, you know, if you and your reps are doing the same amount of work to get from A to B, but if it doesn't happen in the matter of 3 months, and everyone around you it's happening for in 3 months, it does not mean that you're doing something wrong. So again, I don't mean to answer that in such a macro fashion, but I think we put so much pressure on ourselves, both as reps and as clients to kind of, follow this precedent when this industry is so unprecedented, right? And I think it's just important to keep that in mind, particularly during this time.
Yeah, I think that if you're, say, like a newerish writer who is working with a manager for the first time, I think that's what you're getting at with your question, like what to expect in that first year, is that it goes back to having a conversation of what the goals are, and being familiar with the writer's voice and the material that they read. Like, I don't want to read every single thing that, a new client has written, but I want to read, 3-4 other samples that they feel are pretty actionable that they've written within the last few years that maybe we could do something with, we can develop. But even more so, I also want to know the list of ideas, the projects, the types of shows that they love, the creators, filmmakers that they admire, that they wish they could be. And so then that's our goal of trying to figure out what steps can we take, what half steps can we take along the way for them to get to that goal. And so it's like reverse engineering it, working backwards, of trying to figure out what those steps are. And then we work with, trying to find the new idea, the new project that we can build from the ground up together and develop it. And, within that first year, like, in terms of my process, at the very least, like, it is all about development. We hope to generate multiple pieces of material within 1 year, 2 to 3, maybe 4, if depending on how fast and how much time the writer has to do that. But it always comes down to the work. I think with your new client, new writer, you think, oh, well, great, my rep is going to put me on a bunch of generals and I'm going to go around town and that's how everything's going to start. It doesn't really work out that way. It can take, I don't know if you guys agree, but like what I've understand is 2 to 3 years, usually for a client, at the very least 4 years before something big can actually happen. But there's no such thing as an overnight success. So you have to start. It always comes down to the material. Are you writing, or are you just stuck with that one piece of material that you just are hoping will get made, over 2, 3, 4 years? You got to keep generating. And so that's the expectation for us within the first year to be successful, is just to write.
Yeah, and we do, it's similar to what you described, Matt, a similar exercise, because as much as it's such an unpredictable, non-linear business for creatives, for sure, the one thing that is a constant is it's a relationship-driven business. So while setting a round of generals over the course of 6 months may lead to nothing, it doesn't hurt. And it could lead to something, and you just don't know. And you couldn't say which particular general was going to turn into a thing, but if you set 30 of them, your odds all of a sudden just sort of increase. So yeah, in the first year, what we try to do is get a sense of what this person's favorite shows are, who are their favorite producers, their favorite showrunners, and then, put together a roadmap of introductions that we'd like to make over the course of 6-12 months. And see how that goes. Who knows? And then at the end of that 6-12 months, sit down and go, okay, how did it go? What worked? What didn't work? What are we gonna change to, for the next 6-12 months? And keep doing that until things start to hit. And could take a while. It could happen quickly. It's really hard to predict.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to strategy, right? And that strategy is going to differ for each person and when and where they are in their lives. So I think most importantly, to have some type of direction with your reps, knowing what you're working towards so it doesn't feel like you're floating, I think that can be wildly helpful.
Yeah, it's almost like a giant decision tree where if you have, if you're out with a particular project, well, if this sells, that's putting us on this path. If it does not sell, okay, well, maybe focus on your feature idea. And then that's constantly is going to set you off in any, an infinite number of directions. And like you said, Priya, it's just, it's having a strategy of what that looks like. So you're just not flowing with the wind.
Yeah. And for reps, and I don't know if you all feel this way, I am a control freak. So the irony of picking a business in which we only have so much control is not lost on me, right? Where we are not the end all be all decision makers. After going through 7 rounds of drafts on a script and taking it out and no one bites, that's one of the most painful experiences to have on behalf of the client. That doesn't mean that the script is bad. that means that we're living in an industry that there is unpredictability, right? And that goes across the board. It's not just for people that are new. There have been high level writers who have had knockout ideas that have pitched perfectly in the room, and we've gotten passes. It's not what the studio wants right now. So I think just keeping that in mind will create some sanity.
Right. Fantastic. This was that was a really helpful answer to the question. I wanted to move to our Q&A because there's a lot of really great questions that are stacking up, and I'm going to do my best to kind of combine a few of them and answer them. So don't expect a direct answer. We're very limited time. So a couple questions kind of about non-traditional groups. So for so long, the traditional Hollywood writer has been male, has been white, has been young. But if you're female, if you're older, or if you're a person of color or a different sexuality group, I want to ask, how do you feel like writers like that can attract attention and really break into this business at this current point in time? An emphasis on older, because I think that was one of the biggest questions on our board.
Yeah, and I think because this year, like I had touched on, there have been so many great online initiatives through social media, particularly Twitter, that take advantage of those. Like a lot more groups have gotten together to amplify underrepresented voices. And there are many different competitions and fellowship programs that were already in existence that helped. There's that the Meryl Streep Lab, the Script Lab that are, I think, for women over 40. So there's that, and there's other initiatives as well that a lot of writers should take advantage of for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you're hitting a question that we, the industry wide is trying to address. In a lot of ways, like, I could speak to like what Verve is trying to do, is trying to make sure that not all the agents look like me. We don't all look the same. We all have different backgrounds, come from different places, have different tastes. So we're going to respond to different things, because if you have, the decision makers of, we in a lot of ways act as gatekeepers and are signing people and introducing them to the business. You want people who are going to respond to different voices and different backgrounds. So that's not helpful in terms of advice for what you could be doing, but I just think it's something that the industry across the board is really thinking about systemically. And then, yeah, like Matt said, and we've talked about earlier, it's regardless is maintaining the hustle. Submitting for competitions, putting your stuff out there, putting stuff on Twitter, go and make stuff, put it on YouTube. A lot of times it won't go anywhere, but you just have to keep working at it and working hard and putting stuff out there.
Great. I think that was a really good answer from you guys. There's a question about kind of what makes a submission to you guys more professional or versus more amateur. What are some mistakes that you see on the material that you guys get submitted?
I would just say that the sort of the blind direct submissions tend just not to work. In our day-to-day, there's so much happening, there's so much noise that doesn't necessarily break through. And we talked about it a little bit earlier of how we do find clients, and it really being referrals being a big part of it. So that's probably frustrating to hear, but unfortunately it's just sort of the reality. Just a direct email, regardless of the contents of the letter, it's really hard to break through in that way.
Yeah, queries are really tough. I mean, like I get it a ton every day, and I think all managers do. And so there's only so much time that we have to focus on that. And so to my point from earlier is like knowing when to query, like I do glance and look over the queries that I do get, because, for every 100, there's probably going to be 1 or 2 that were really worth following up on, some of Adam Kohlbrenner's top clients he found on queries. Granted, that was, years ago, but still, like, we do love queries. We go look through them, but like in terms of red flags, or just in terms of advice, like make sure the subject line is succinct and it has the information that's most pertinent, and say, like, if you were a finalist in the Nickel, or for me personally, Austin Film Festival, I'm gonna read it, you know, like, know who your audience is and know what they're looking for. And in the body, make sure it's also quick and succinct. Don't list all 10 log lines that you have and have us pick one. Pick the one that you, or two that you feel are the most actionable. You know, that way you've already done the work and we're not having to read this long email trying to figure out, is this going to be worth responding to, if we even decide to read it, you know? And again, to what Chris said, it's about referrals too. So if you know somebody in, you know, who may have a connection to me, that's always going to be the thing that I will respond to the most, because this is a mutual person that we know that is vouching for you, and I value that relationship and I trust this person's opinion. I'm going to read. So again, you have to do the work, you have to make those connections, and you also have to know when it's the right time to strike.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Another question that comes in is asking specifically, are projects intended for international co-production more or less attractive now? And I think that's also just a general question of, are there certain projects that are more attractive in the COVID age and what we're going through right now?
Yeah, I mean, earlier when you mentioned, you know, how things changed with the COVID of it all, I mean, one of the things is just creatively, especially sort of early days of the pandemic, is writers would have an idea for a pitch, and do you address COVID or not? Like, is the world of the pitch, like, include what's happening? You know, and that was a tough one to answer. This is all unprecedented. But, you know, I think what everyone has realized is that, no, I don't think people want to, I don't know if people necessarily want to watch that. And so just something we're noticing is, I think, you know, there was this big trend in television towards the anti-hero and these really dark, brooding dramas. And, you know, I think a move towards maybe a little bit lighter fare is, you know, that's a big generalization, but I think that's what folks are looking for.
Yeah, I agree. Cool. I think that there's again a bit of an unpredictability. The wildest things that I didn't think were going to sell have sold, and every studio is kind of figuring out on their own with more and more data that's being released based on films that are getting released, based on television series that are getting released. I think the pandemic nature is probably something that everyone just does not want to see on screen as far as escapism. And I love the idea of the fun fair. Naturally, I think that is something that's going to have a real resurgence. But I also think, you know, movies like 9 Days that are incredibly thought-provoking, potentially there will also be a real space for that. We don't know yet. We're waiting for the data.
Fantastic. I wanted to ask a quick question of Alan, because we haven't covered enough the legal side. I just wanted to ask, this comes from John, when do you usually get involved in the project? And do you have any advice for kind of writers to preserve their material or preserve their legal rights early in the process?
Well, I usually get involved when there's a deal to be made. So all of the things that the managers and agents have been talking about in terms of submissions and how to go about getting your work seen, that's not something that I typically get involved in. I'll get a call saying a studio or production company wants to hire a writer to do a treatment, a draft, whatever. And that's when the lawyer typically gets involved to negotiate that deal, to try to figure out what the deal-making history is for that particular client, if there is any, the deal-making history for the studio or production company, what have they paid other people in similar situations, so forth. I would urge anyone who creates literary material to register it with the Writers Guild upon creation. And I would also be very, very careful about involving producers into your project. You know, that can be a dangerous situation if the producer claims to have contributed creative ideas to the project, and then all of a sudden you've got baggage, even though that producer hasn't introduced you to representation, hasn't sourced financing. All of a sudden you've got a partner on a project that that may do you no good, but is sort of just glommed onto your writing. Again, I hope that's not too cynical an observation, but lawyers tend to deal with worst case scenarios, and that's something that I've seen unfortunately too many times.
Fantastic, Alan. That's I think a really helpful kind of primer on the basics of how you interact with writers. We're running out of time here, so I just kind of want to ask kind of a general kind of out there. There's the audience is a combination of people who are looking for that first opportunity, and it's also a combination of a lot of people who have maybe had some success as a writer but haven't yet able to kind of attract that like last agent. So I guess kind of the final thing out to you guys. Do you guys have any advice if they're looking for new rights? You've had ones before. You are thinking, how do they best get your attention, kind of in direct communication with you guys? And what is something that would get your attention now, so that you would stop and look at it?
I think really relying on the resources that have, to be honest, have been more recently implemented within our industry by way of, film festivals and programs. And if a programmer for a festival that I believe in, and I'm not just talking about the Sundance and the South by, I'm talking about even the smaller, programmed film festivals are calling me about somebody in particular, I'm taking that very seriously. If a producer is calling me and telling me about a writer or a director or a piece of talent when it comes to actors, I'm taking that very seriously. So I saw that someone wrote in the web chat that, it's hard to just say rely on family. And I get that. I really, really do, particularly for people of color who come up in this industry. Like, it is not normalized for Black and brown people to have pure access. It's just not. So I think really utilizing these third-party programs that aren't just the agency route or management route would be wildly helpful. And those submissions are taken seriously, at least by Management 360. We have a whole team of people at our company that go through writers and directors and new talent that are trying to really break through, particularly from schools like the North Carolina School of the Arts or Chapman University. It's not just the NYUs and it's not just the Yales. I think that there's a lot more room for discovery now than there ever has been.
Yeah, and I think also, like, for us, we like to think outside the box in terms of clients that we rep. We have people who were sculpturists and people who were found off of Twitter. Like, it all comes down to voice, and do you bring something? Are you the signal from the noise, is what we always say. We can talk about, it is like the referrals, like Priya said, like, I will always answer those referrals that I get from a film festival programmer or for producer, because those are meaningful relationships for us. And they've done the work. It shows that you've been vetted. So that, again, it goes back to what I just said, like, can you find somebody who can vouch for you to one of us? But at the same time, we get queries and, we come across all these, emerging writers who just graduated from UCLA, USC, all kind of seem and look the same. But what else is different about you? And so that's why, if you're a sculpturist or, on Twitter or whatever, like that, can you bring something that's fresh and new and different that people will be excited about? And so it comes back to what I said before. Do you know what your superpower is? And do you know how to amplify it in a way? And again, I don't know if that seems too amorphous or vague, but that's for you to figure out,
I think no, Matt, I think that's a great thing. And I'm sorry, I'm getting the shouts on my chat. But I really want to thank everyone here on this panel. Matt, Chris, Priya, and Alan, you guys have been fantastic. A real big thank you to Jan, who has been ASL interpreting this entire thing. And also a real huge thanks to Dustin, who has helped coordinate things over the WGA Foundation. Thank you guys so much for sharing your time. Thank you to everyone who was here. I know it was a short period of time to get a lot of questions in, but I hope you guys got something valuable here. Thanks, everybody.